Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Glitch Pokemon Gold. You might be familiar with Glitch Pokemon, Misty Note from Generation 1 being the most widely known, but there are a lot more in Gen 1. In Gen 2, there are still a few around, but not so much. I have made a video of the Glitch Pokemon from Gold and Silver, and if you haven't seen it already, I recommend you do so because there's some pretty good info covering them. Anyway, today we are going to see how those Glitch Pokemon will do against the Elite Four, and whether they are able to make it to the Hall of Fame. We're also going to see what happens when they are entered into the Hall of Fame. Pretty much all the Pokemon had no moves when I tamed them, so I taught them a few moves to actually make it somewhat interesting. Otherwise, all of them but one would be using Struggle the whole time. And the other one only had Horn Drill, with Foresight. You'll also notice that I have a fainted Koga at the top of the party. That's to avoid a side effect that would happen when I would have one or more of those Glitch Pokemon at the top of the party. Remember, some of those, Index 00 and FF, actually hide the party and act as cancel buttons too. As you can see, it's level 79, and I left it there because it learns 5 moves at level 80, which you'll see here. I also want to mention this Pokemon is Hex FC, where it learned Dragon Breath, and so I actually gave it the Dragon Fang. But there's something interesting about that which is say for now take note that it's holding the Dragon Fang, and that it tries to evolve afterwards. Now I didn't want to make their levels too low. Now I know 55 is a bit higher, since that's pretty much higher than all the Pokemon we'll find in the Elite Four, but I'm only going to be using 4 of them, because the egg is kind of not very good, and we'll see that later, and Koga's fainted for one, and the other one actually is broken, and we'll see that as well. So essentially I can only use 3 of those Pokemon, and one of the 3 isn't very good, but it does something pretty cool, which we'll see in a few. But without further ado, let's see how these Glitch Pokemon will do against the Elite Four. I'm also going to investigate what I mentioned in the last part, using walk through walls. The goal is to beat Will first, and try to leave his room and return. With that being the case, let the battle begin. So first up is what I call Index 00, because it literally occupies Index 00, or it can be called a Hex 00. Anyway, it actually has very good stats, with the exception of its attack. It is just 1, its base attack. But it has a pretty damn good special, defense, and HP, so you can see why I gave it Thunder and Mega Drain. And it makes perfect sense for Thunder since Will likes to use Pokemon weak to Electric, or at least half his team is anyway. So it becomes pretty helpful throughout this battle. And thank goodness for that critical hit on Executor. I will be using Speed Up throughout most of these battles, just to, of course, speed it up. Especially with like the Thunder hits on these Pokemon that should be a one-shot kill. We don't need to see its HP go down very slowly. We'll save that for another time. Now he's going to throw out his other Xatu, which is going to be super easy, because it's just 1 Thunder away from a KO. Which, giving Index 00 Thunder was a great idea. Otherwise this probably wouldn't be feasibly possible, and would just take forever. Now I was expecting this Jinx to be a little bit more difficult, but I think with the level advantage it was a little too easy, because we take it out in 1 shot, which is quite nice. And the plan is to show each Pokemon for like each different trainer. So the next one we're going to use is FE for Koga. But before doing that, I'm going to save the game and do what I said. We're going to investigate what's going to happen with walk through walls after beating Will. So we go into Koga's room. And what's pretty fun, we can go up here and, this door is still blocked off, so we can't go through it. But we can go back the way we came, walk through walls, and go back into Will's room. And I was like, oh, will auto-path us through the wall? And it doesn't. We're actually stuck unless we walk through walls again. But we're going to leave again. And now I'm curious to see what's going to happen when I walk and leave the Elite Four completely. And then we go back in, and it resets everything. So it acts like we literally just came back for a rematch to do everything again. So we have to battle Will again, and I'm not going to show that, so I'm going to reload my state. At first I thought, this wouldn't be too helpful, because you don't really get anything out of it. But then I realized, technically you could use it to do like infinite battles if you wanted on the Elite Four, but not actually complete the Elite Four, mostly for experience, which isn't too bad. Although, if you have walk through walls, the method I have, you can just use it to get rare candies, so it's kind of pointless in that way, but who knows, maybe you just want to battle, get EXP. Anyway, so now it's time to battle Koga. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using Index FE for Koga. However, I forgot I still have Index 00 in the front, so we're going to use him to take out the Ariados first. But the reason why I want to use FE is because it's able to learn Fire Blast. It also has a very, very good special attack, so I also gave it Sidekick for that reason. However, something very odd and unfortunate about this Pokemon is that its stats are very extreme. Its HP is really good at 244. Its attack is 0, so that's pretty much useless. Its defense is very high as well at 234. Its special attack, as I mentioned, is insane at 245. These are the base stats. And then it has 0 special defense and 0 speed. So if it gets hit by anything special, it's basically done, and there's no sense using an attacking move, and it's slow as crap. But it's a freaking defensive tank physically, and it hits really freaking hard, especially. And case in point, it got its ass rocked by a Sidekick from Venomoth. So you're going to switch back into Index 00, because it's pretty good defensively, and it has Thunder. Forgot that Spikes is pretty annoying. And it missed Thunder like a dope. Thankfully Venomoth missed Supersonic though. But then he missed Thunder again, and then he gets hit by Supersonic. What a moron. Then he hurts himself with Confusion, but that's a good example of how good his defense is, because you saw it went down by like, what, 3 or something? And then Psychic only does 5 damage. So it's very safe to say that Index 00 is a tank. And thankfully he'll finally hit Thunder this time. And he gains a level 2, which is quite nice. You get a brief look at his stats. Attack is very low, but everything else is pretty decent. A little slow too, but not terrible. His speed looks terrible just because of how high his other stats are. Since FE fainted, I'm just going to use Index 00 to finish off the fight. Thunder's pretty good enough to take out the rest of his team. Of course, his muffs got minimized, which is going to be a pain. But it didn't matter, thankfully. But Thunder's been very helpful. I usually don't like Thunder because it only has 70 accuracy, but it's pretty decent when it hits, so I guess it's worth the risk. And thankfully Crobat's weak to Thunder, so it should be an easy one-shot. Of course we don't outspeed him because Crobat's so fast, and we miss. And then he gets a hit, but it doesn't really matter, since 00 is so tanky, he can afford to miss some shots. It's actually very fitting to have Thunder on him, since it's almost a guaranteed one-shot. But now that we're all done with Koga, it's time to move on to Bruno. But before fighting him, I'm going to walk on the lava over here and say, "I am Satan," as somebody said in the last part, being able to walk on lava. But I'm actually going to take this opportunity to heal up before we start the battle, restore power points, so I'll be right back. And now we're back here with Bruno, and he's going to do his iconic hoo-ha, and the battle's going to start. Now I'm going to try and use Index FE again, since it didn't get much screen time in the last battle. This one should be a bit better for it, since a lot of Bruno's Pokemon are physical attackers, and it actually has some defense. And it should be quite good offensively with its amazing special attack, paired with Sidekick as well. I'm going to switch Sidekick into the front of the attack menu, if you will, since it's basically all I'm going to be using this entire time. It should prove to be pretty helpful, this fight, and I'm hoping that FE can make it through it, so let's see. Hitmonlee shouldn't pose much of a threat, as we can see there, and then Sidekick's gonna demolish Hitmonlee, unfortunately for him. Now, ironically, Hitmonchan is going to pose probably the biggest threat in this fight, since Hitmonchan, for some reason, has the elemental punches, and in Generation 2 and 3, technically, it wasn't until Gen 4 where it was fixed, where the elemental punches do special damage, even though they're physical hitting moves. It's based on the type, so that's actually a problem for our Pokemon since he literally has no special defense. Thankfully, Hitmonchan's special attack is pretty terrible, so those moves don't even really pose much of a threat anyway. And the fact that FE's HP is still pretty decent, he's actually able to survive one and get a Psychic off. And that brings him down to 2 Pokemon, one of which being his iconic Onix, which he's going to bring out next. And since of course Onix is a rock ground type, it also has a lot of physical moves, so I decided to take a moment to show off FC, which I remembered had Bubble of all moves that it learned once it reached a level 80. Which definitely seems like an odd move to use in an Elite Four battle, because usually by that point you got like Surf, Waterfall, even Water Pulse, not freaking Bubble. But it did work, and honestly if it was any other move it probably would have fainted the Onix. Well, any water type move that is. And Onix goes for the Sandstorm, but now we're gonna finish off this massive rock snake with a measly Bubble. How funny is that? But now it's time for a brief story time here. So we're to the last Pokemon, Machamp, and I decided to keep in FC, which does evolve into Ivysaur, and then evolves into Venusaur, and it has much better stats then. So I'm using Dragon's Breath here, or Dragon Breath, technically. And it has the Dragon Fang. Now something I mentioned earlier about the Dragon Fang was that it's important because it actually is useless. It doesn't do anything in this game. It's actually the Dragon Scale that acts the way the Dragon's Fang should. So there's no extra damage from having it equipped with that Dragon Breath. Which is unfortunate too, because when its stats were higher, it was actually pretty devastating, and I'm pretty sure it took him out in 2 shots. That is not the case here. It's nice that we got some paralysis made a bit easier, and the Sandstorm helped whittle Machamp down too, but I decided to switch it into FE to help finish off the Machamp since he had Psychic and more HP than the other Pokemon. Unsurprisingly, that Psychic was enough to take out the Machamp, so that's pretty much going to wrap up this battle, and once he's done giving his spiel, I'm going to go into the next room, save, then heal up. I'm basically just going to cut it until I'm ready to show you guys the next thing. Which is going to involve walking out here in the void, just kind of standing around. It's like, well, cool, I can float in midair. Yeah, we get it, walk through walls is cool. So that brings us to Karen, the 4th, and technically the leader, I guess, of the Elite Four. You'd think the champion is, but especially like with Kanto in Gen 1, it always seemed like Lance was the leader. Anyway, that's a bit off topic for what we're doing here. I'm actually going to show off the egg very briefly, since I haven't really done much with it yet. You'll notice there when I open the item menu by accident, the sprite of the Glitch Pokemon changes. That's normal. Even though it's not normal. But when we send out the egg, it crashes the game, which definitely is not normal. And now I'm just going to reload. Karen's first Pokemon is probably the most difficult to deal with, since it has very good defense stats. So I'm going to use Index FF and use a Solar Beam. Hoping to take it out in one shot. But that is not the case. It's very close, though. Umbreon's a little lacking in the offensive part, so it's not too bad, and a Hyper Beam's enough to take it out, so it wasn't much of an issue. But what is an issue is Index FF. If you don't remember or you haven't seen the video, when Index FF gains EXP, it always seems to level up all the way to 255 and loop around to level 3, which I am not going to show the entirety of because it takes a while, so I'm just going to cut that out. You'll notice its stats got a lot more crappy, because of course it's level 3, and its HP is all messed up, which is an interesting effect. But I'm going to switch out because it's level 3, it's not going to last. Although the HP is an interesting factor that will come up soon. So Karen's Biobloom is up next, and it took me a little bit to decide what I wanted to send in. And so I go with Index FE, because I remember it has Fire Blast and Sidekick, but mostly for Fire Blast. Now, unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, it has horrible special defense, and we'll notice here Disaster strikes when Biobloom decides to use a Petal Dance on us, and that's going to faint FE. Karen's definitely a worthy opponent for these Glitch Pokemon, because at the very beginning, like I said, they only know Struggle, so that's already kind of hard. The moves they learn typically aren't very good for taking out dark types, let alone grass types, so we have a bit of trouble here. However, like Umbreon, Index 00 is very tanky and also has decent offense, unlike Umbreon. So with the use of Thunder, it should be good enough to take out this Vileplume. Except for the fact it gets a Sunspore off, despite being confused, which I was really going to say was a good thing that it got confused, but Paralysis is super annoying. Thanks to Index 00's tank-like abilities, Petal Dance doesn't really do too much damage, which is quite nice. And Thunder is able to hit and do some pretty good damage here. And should take out Vileplume. Once again, I see something weak to water and was debating what to send in, and I figured why not send in FC since it had Bubble. Now unfortunately it does not do near as much as it did to the Onix earlier. The same can be said for Dragon Breath, and no bonus from the Dragon Fang, but it did get paralyzed off, which is a very nice thing about Dragon Breath. I just want to take a second to rant how it's called Dragon Breath and not Dragon's Breath. I feel like it just sounds better when it's called Dragon's Breath, opposed to just Dragon Breath, but whatever. But I'm starting to get a little impatient, so I'm making a switch into Index 00, because it really is probably the best on the team. So as you see here, I start to get trolled by Gengar with the stupid paralysis. So I'm actually going to make a cut here. Although amidst the madness that was going on, I made a switch into FF, and we can actually see an example of what happens when it gets hit when its HP is crazy. And it just looks really silly. As far as I know, it keeps the amount of HP it had before it down-leveled. Although FF took quite a bit of hits, so there's a good chance it might actually be more than when it appears. And it's a glitched amount. And it has one Thunder left, just enough for this hopefully easy Murkrow. And it is, so we take out the Murkrow, not much problem. So we finally defeat Karen after probably like 10 minutes, but I cut some of it out. Anyway, so I'm actually going to take this opportunity to heal up, and then we'll see how the Pokemon will do against the champion. So, see you guys there. I've seen this detail pointed out before, and I do agree, where there's music playing, and then that silence when Lance talks to you. I think it's very powerful, and it was a very good thing to point out. And after talking for a little bit, the silence will be stopped by a pretty good theme. I'm really glad they had this theme, the champion theme. It's also used for Red. It started the string of champion themes to where, okay, there was a special one in Gen 1, and then Gen 2 had a special one, and it continued on, which is a good feature I'm glad they included. And you'll notice here that I actually revived the Quilava and put him in the front. There is a reason for that. I don't think it actually matters that he was revived, but it was also to show off the fact that the Pokemon will take the sprite, the Glitch Pokemon will take the sprite of a normal Pokemon, basically the last sprite that was shown on screen. So for example, the trainer sprite that we see, that's why they always show up that way, until there's something else there. And now unfortunately I actually forgot to restore PP for Index 00, which is going to be very helpful for this Gyarados since it has Thunder, which I plan to use. And to my knowledge, in Gen 2, when Rain started, that also allowed Thunder and other electric-type moves to hit without missing. I don't know if it's something that came later than Gen 2, but I definitely know it's a thing now. The point is that was very helpful there, if it is a thing. And Quilava will get a level, which is kind of nice. And it looks like Index 00 is very close to getting a level 2. And Charizard's going to be super easy, another Thunder away from victory there. Kind of a stupid idea on Lance's part, honestly. Although he probably did that because Index 00 is a Steel type. Already this battle is going much better than the last one against Karen. Mostly because I didn't have very good moves for Dark types, as I mentioned. It also seems like Dark type's just generally decent in this generation, because like, other than fighting, you got Bug, pretty much. And Bug's to the point where it's really still not that good in this generation. He does have his Dragonites, and the ones that are cheaty, because I think it's the level 47 ones that have Barrier, and they shouldn't have that at all. And of course, the level 50 Dragonite, that should be at least level 55, like his other ones that are also below level 55. But we're not going to focus on that. And we're not going to focus on the fact that I have Glitch Pokemon either. Exactly. That's besides the point. I was hoping to send in FC again to try and do something, but unfortunately FC is just weak. I originally, like I said, had it where it was a Venusaur, and it would have survived that Hyper Beam, and then would have used Dragon Breath, whatever, and would have taken out the Dragonite in one hit. Seriously, it was that good. It's actually awesome to be able to have a Glitch Pokemon evolve into a normal Pokemon, because at least when you don't use like a Mail Rider to change the Pokemon's moves, at least you can get like some illegitimate moves, like, you know, for example, having Dragon Breath on a Venusaur, or even Bubble in that case. Thankfully, once again, Index 00 is to the rescue and basically taking everybody out with Thunder. I had a feeling that was going to be the best Pokemon of the bunch, because once again, it has the most balanced stats, and pretty much the best stats of the bunch. Like, FF has good stats, but the problem is that it down levels level 3, and that's just not helpful, unless the Pokemon are level 4 or 5 at most. But a sidekick here from FE, hoping to take out Dragonite in one hit. And it did not. But the reason why I did that is because I thought that Dragonite didn't have any special moves. That was a mistake on my part, and it used Thunder, but it missed, thankfully. And then his second Dragonite falls to Sidekick. And that leaves him with just 2 Pokemon left, one of which being his other level 47 Dragonite. I decided to keep FC in, which was a mistake, because once again he has special attacking Dragonites, and I forgot about that. So he's pretty much going to one-shot him with a Blizzard, which is unfortunate. Like I said, this Pokemon would be good, but it's just so... It's like, kind of like Chansey in a way, where like, it has really good stats in some departments. But it's like Chansey's defense, if I remember correctly, is like garbage almost, and essentially you get hit with a fighting move and it's gone. And it's kind of like that with that Pokemon being special. And it doesn't have to be like type advantage either, because it has literally 0 base stat and a special defense, so it just flat out sucks. So once again, we're going to switch into probably the best Pokemon on the team, which I'll say once again is Index 00. Hits a Thunder on Aerodactyl and also the Dragonite, and it just flat out takes him out, no problem. And that will let us defeat Lance. So I will say they are capable of defeating the Elite Four, but I would just say that that could probably be done with Index 00 itself. Maybe I'll try that at some point, who knows. But anyway, that's going to finish up the Elite Four, but now we have to see what happens in the Hall of Fame. So let's go into there. I don't know if it's just me, but it just seems like the wrong music is playing in this place. I don't know why. I can't offhand remember what the music that plays in the Hall of Fame in Gen 1. All I know is that in Gen 3, it seems like the music makes a lot more sense once you get into the Hall of Fame room. Anyway, let's see what happens here. We put him on the machine that puts him in the Hall of Fame. So the first Pokemon is Strange. If I put something that acts as a cancel button, it wouldn't show anything. It would just show the trainer, so that's the issue. So there is FC, if I'm correctly, because it's number 54. No, that's FC. 54 is FE, which makes plenty of sense. And then this should be 00, yep. Which is interesting, it showed that one, but I think the reason why it cut off is because it no longer thought there were Pokemon in the party, because they act as cancel buttons. So that's why it didn't show FF. Had I put Index 00 last and put FF over it, it would have shown that one instead. But seeing those Glitch Pokemon in the Hall of Fame reminds me of taking a corrupted party from Super Glitch to the Hall of Fame in Gen 1. But anyway, it was pretty neat to see them in there. Hopefully we learned about the practical use of these Glitch Pokemon in battle. I definitely come to the conclusion that Index 00 is probably the best of the bunch, somewhat followed by FC and in theory FF if it doesn't have the EXP leveling problem. The Glitch Egg is basically useless and FE is just too fragile in my opinion. And let me know what you guys think about this. And what you guys thought of this video. It's definitely a little bit different from the current norm, as I have kind of strayed away from the Let's Glitch type video. Anyway, this is going to conclude this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and for making it this far. I hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next time.